Hi, this is Heidi Burgess. Today I want to talk about large scale, which is usually top-down reconciliation. Let's start by talking about the meaning of the title. When I talk about large-scale reconciliation, I mean reconciling entire societies, or at least large parts of a society. This slide that Guy made years ago shows how daunting a problem this is. He tells the story of being on a panel with a prominent physicist who said that one of the privileges of being a scientist is understanding orders of magnitude, by which he meant orders of 10. We really don't have a good gut-level understanding of this. He went on to explain that the difference between a small, what was called blockbuster bomb, and the Hiroshima atomic bomb was 4 orders of magnitude. That's the same difference between the speed of a person who was walking and the speed of the space shuttle in orbit. That's an enormous difference, right? Well, the difference between reconciling 2 people, here shown sitting with a mediator around a table, is 5 orders of magnitude smaller than a small city. It's 6 orders of magnitude smaller than a large 3 million person city. It's 7 orders of magnitude smaller than a medium-sized country, and 8 orders of magnitude smaller than a large country such as the United States. Is it any wonder that the strategies that we use to reconcile those 2 people sitting at a table are not enough to deal with 5, 6, 7, or 8 orders of magnitude? So just doing more dialogues isn't going to work. We need to do qualitatively different things. Why is that so? Why can't we just do more of the same? Consider Israel and Palestine. The current population of Palestine, including Gaza and the West Bank, is a little over 5 million people. The population of Israel is a little over 9 million, including Jews, Muslims, and Christians. So together that's 14 million people. Typically, about 10 to 20 people take place in a dialogue, though 20 is pretty large. But let's assume all dialogues are done with 20 people. 14 million divided by 20 equals 700,000 dialogues. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But the assumption is commonly made that new attitudes about the other, developed during dialogues, will diffuse. The 20 people involved will go home and share the stories of their experiences with their family and friends. And those people will then share their experience with their family and friends. Does this really happen? After considerable searching, I could find no literature that documented such diffusion. Indeed, there's not very much literature evaluating dialogues at all. But the 2 most useful articles, which I should have assigned for Unit 4 but didn't have room, were meta-analyses of primary evaluations of dialogues done from 1997 to 2006. That's the article shown on the left by Dressel and Rogi, and 2006 to 2017, which is the article shown on the right by Frantel, Miles, and Rue. Almost all of the outcomes documented in these articles were personal outcomes. Changes in knowledge about the other, about societal conditions such as systemic racism and power differences. Changes in attitudes about the other and in personal behaviors, such as being more emotionally open, better listeners, improved conflict resolution skills, etc. There was only passing mention in a couple of the original studies about planning for actions after the dialogue, and no indication about whether or not these actions actually happened. So while such diffusion might happen, I can find no evidence that it does, and I have read articles related to Israel-Palestine particularly that suggest that it doesn't. There is something called the Reentry Problem, where a newly transformed dialogue participant goes home to his or her family and friends, all excited to share what they've learned, but they are instead shunned as having sold out and they're slowly or sometimes quickly convinced that their old ways of thinking, viewing the other side as the enemy, was right, and the new ideas that they learned in the dialogue were limited to that setting at best. So scaling up to societal change through dialogue is unlikely to succeed, in my view. The other common small group approach to reconciliation is what has been called interactive problem solving, which takes place in problem-solving workshops. This article by Herb Kelman, who was one of the people who developed interactive problem solving, reviews his own and other colleagues' 40 years of work using problem-solving workshops in Israel and Palestine. Problem-solving workshops differ from dialogues because they have notion of scale-up, in other words, societal applicability, built right into their structure. They are what Kelman calls microprocesses, in that they only involve a few, again 10 to 20 people, but they are as designed, as the abstract says, quote, to produce changes in the macro processes of conflict resolution through the joint development of new ideas and insights that can be fed into the political cultures of the two societies, unquote. So the original intention is to transfer the outcomes of the small group processes into larger society. How is that done? According to Kelman, the microprocesses provide inputs into the macro processes by creating a setting in which participants, who are typically unofficial representatives of the disputing sides, are free to come up with what might be considered crazy ideas if they were proposed by an official or public figure, but they can be proposed and considered by unofficial representatives in private, which these processes always are. Then, if the workshop is well designed, the best of these ideas, the ones that were agreed to and honed by all the participants from all sides of the conflict, can be fed upwards to officials. This is made easier if some of the unofficial representatives have personal relationships with officials. That's often one of the attributes workshop designers are looking for in their participants. In another article, Kelman describes the micro to macro logic of problem-solving workshops more specifically. The workshop steps constitute what he refers to as links in a chain, the success of each determining the potential macro impact of the workshop. These steps are: 1. Workshop participants are selected who are both prepared to engage in the process and in positions to influence political thinking within their own societies. 2. Participants interact with each other according to the ground rules and the agenda that govern the workshops. 3. Over the course of the workshops, the nature of the interaction changes in the direction of analytical, non-adversarial problem-solving discourse. 4. As a result of those interactions in the workshop or a series of workshops, participants' attitudes, mutual images, ideas for resolving the conflict, and expectations for the future change. These changes in attitude produce changes in the participants' political behavior once they return home. 6. The participants' political actions and statements have an impact on the political behavior of other members of the political elites in their respective societies. 7. These changes, in turn, help to produce changes in the political atmosphere of the two societies, making it more conducive to a negotiated peace agreement. 8. The changed atmosphere has an impact on the thinking and action of policymakers. And 9. These, in turn, lead to a durable, high-quality, negotiated, society-wide agreement. Does this work? Kelman admits in the article I was just quoting from that the evaluation of such workshop impacts is very difficult because, he says, again I quote, the most relevant criteria for evaluating the effectiveness of interactive problem solving is its contribution to changes in the political cultures of the parties that would make them more receptive to negotiation, end quote. But these changes happen very slowly and in a wide variety of settings. making it both difficult to measure and to tie cause to effect. Further, there are both practical and ethical reasons why the standard experimental model of evaluation is inappropriate, as well as impossible to use for this kind of process. Kelman suggests evaluating each link in the chain I just discussed, as an alternative way to evaluating the full process. And he says such efforts were beginning when he wrote his article 13 years ago. I've not, unfortunately, been able to find reports of any of those studies. I would appreciate hearing from viewers if you know of any. So I have to leave this discussion by saying that this theory seems like a promising method, but whether it really brings about lasting societal cultural level change is still an open question.